Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. Today we are going to talk to Richard Rayner about his new novel called The Devil's Wind, published by HarperCollins. Thank you, Richard, for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
This is a very strange book in that the place to start reading it and really get an idea of what Richard has accomplished here is the title page. Because opposite the title page is this incredible picture of folks with some kind of glasses on, sitting in what I would call beach chairs.
Sitting in deck chairs, we call them in England.
Deck chairs. And I know what they're doing because I've seen the photo before. What are they doing?
They're watching a nuclear explosion happening above ground in Nevada, just a few miles away.
Which is the stupidest thing.
The novel is set in largely in Nevada and also in LA, but mostly in Las Vegas in the 1950s. And it had its first genesis in the story about a murdered jazz player, which then caused me to do a lot of research about Vegas in the 50s, in the kind of period between the Bugsy Siegel moment in the late 40s and the Rat Pack moment in the late 50s. The novel happens in between there, where one of the big things that was going on at that time, as I discovered, was that they were having above ground nuclear explosions every month. It was the best show in the country. And I was just blown away when I read about that and the circumstances in which the tests happened and the enthusiasm at the time with which they were greeted, that essentially everyone thought, gee, this is a brilliant idea. We're letting off bombs 50 miles north of Vegas and the mushroom clouds could be seen all the way to LA.
You have a great description in the book about Vegas at that time. In 1951, Vegas is a shrill and restless resort town, you're right. Cowboy clothes and old jalopies are still seen alongside the Cadillacs, and some people still ride horseback from casino to casino. But the city is changing, growing fast. And that's where you're focusing on, that fast growth. The downtown glitter gulch is in place, and the bigger, fancier hotels are starting to spring up along the section of Highway 91 known as the Strip. Sandstorms swirl and knock out electricity supply overtaxed by the hectic growth of this small place. Only an embryo of what it will later become. Las Vegas is nonetheless in the throes of acute prosperity, less a city than a money-making machine, a mecca for gamblers, divorcees, elopers, dreamers, and lambsters of all kinds. What a great word that is.
Well, lambsters.
Where did you find that?
Well, A.J. Liebling.
Whoa, that's great.
I've done quite a bit of work for The New Yorker, and one of the things I did when I was researching the novel was to look back through all the New Yorker files about stuff they'd done on Vegas in the 50s, which was actually really quite a lot, because Liebling, who was obviously one of the genius reporters of that time, had become friendly with this Vegas newspaper owner called Hank Greenspun. So he wrote a lot about Vegas, really, really great stuff.
The other thing is the book focuses on the 50s, and one of the things the things that a person wanted to do in the 50s was to have a life and have it well, have a good life. And the main character writes or says, our house, or rather one of our houses, the biggest of our houses, we had a few, was a place in the Moorish style built in Beverly Hills in the 20s by a silent movie star who hanged himself in the 5-car garage. 8 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, a billiards room, a gym, a pool tiled in green and gilt mosaic, a kitchen big enough for a one-ring circus, several baronial fireplaces, and a library with sets of leather-bound great literature that I dipped into sometimes. These volumes had been on the shelves when we moved in and appeared to pass from owner to owner as if enshrined. That knocks me out, because that really is, wealth. Like, I gotta have it. I mean, you live in Los Angeles, apparently you just drive around and look at houses. Are you in real estate?
No, but of course, looking at houses is a way of finding out what the culture is. And, architecture gives you a lot of information about the way people live and what their aspirations are. And the main male character of the novel, whose name is Maurice Valentine, that's not his real name. He's a self-invented, semi-fictionalized architect who is on the make, who is an ambitious guy who's married money. He's a cynical guy and very concerned about where he lives and how much it's worth.
Things are going well for Maurice Valentine at this time. And then Mallory Walker walks into his life. And she's one of the most mysterious, fascinating women you'll ever meet. And we're going to find out more about her when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast. I'm Jim Foster. Sitting across from me is Richard Rayner, the author of The Devil's Wind, a novel published by HarperCollins, about which the Kyrgyz Review Service has this to say: a thriller as sharp as a new laser print of Double Indemnity. This is a really insider type review. Rayner makes it seem as if it's never been done before, as if no femme fatale ever lured a man into her web, no mobsters ever rolled dice in Las Vegas, and no atomic bombs ever exploded in the Nevada desert in the 50s. Expertly judged work. I don't know what the heck that means. Executed with an apparent relish for all things noir.
Right. Well,
I like that part, all things noir, because I love to say noir.
I love all things noir myself. And
okay.
I grew up in the north of England, and one of my the first experiences of American culture, I guess, was rock and roll. The second experience was watching movies on the TV, and I realized that I was drawn to this particular type of film. Orson Welles' Touch of Evil, Out of the Past with Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer, the greatest femme fatale movie of the lot, I think, where at the end of the movie, Jane Greer shoots Mitchum right in the you-know-where and leaves him to die.
Thank you for saying you-know-where.
Good for her. And one of the things I wanted to do in the book was have a compelling femme fatale, but give her a reason why she has become that way, and actually kind of dramatize that reason. So we tell the whole of her story from her childhood, which is woven in between the story of the architect.
The present story. Now, she and Maurice Valentine are both involved with a gentleman by the name of Paul Mantalini.
Right.
Tell us about Paul Mantalini.
Well, I'd written a novel before called The Cloud Sketcher, which was about a Finnish architect trying to build a skyscraper in New York in the 1920s.
Okay.
And I had in that book Mr. Paul Mantalini, who was then a young bootlegger. And my editor at HarperCollins said to me, gee, I always really liked this guy.
So we get a lot of Paul Mantalini in this one. He is the head mobster, shall we say, right, of Vegas at the time.
So he reappears in this one, running Las Vegas, in effect. And
there are several levels to him.
Right.
I mean, you see him as the well-dressed, coiffed, shaved, March the Boss, king of the casino that he's in, but behind his position as a man lay control of as a titan, lay control of law in Vegas and much of the political clout. And behind all that, the foundation of the pyramid was a threat of violence so final and unanswerable that it need rarely be invoked and was never referred to, not by him, and never in his company.
Right.
So you have both sides. I mean, I think that's very realistic, and in a sense, I was very glad you did that, because we can get too fascinated,
right,
with the glamour of being a big mobster.
Right. And he's a guy who sort of, comes from that world and would like to. He tells himself and he tells other people that his empire has moved beyond it, and he has other strings to his bow. He, in some sort of genuinely unself-interested way, he mentors the Beth Dyer character, the woman who becomes Mallory Walker, the bad girl. And it's not out of any kind of sexual thing. It's just that he likes to be surrounded. He has very good taste. He likes to be surrounded by beautiful people, smart people, talented people. He knows a good thing when he sees it. And
one of the things he sees and he uses as a marketing ploy, these atomic bomb tests. He was a realist, and he recognized that certain types of change were inevitable and must therefore be embraced before they could be controlled. Chose instead to look for the possibilities. Every month or so, just 50 miles away, across the sand and the scrub, would be a lively replay of the awesome power that had flattened Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What an opportunity. Who wouldn't want to see that? He set his publicist to work.
Well, this was when the nuclear blast started happening. There was concern in Vegas about whether the town might actually just be blown away.
Yeah.
But then they realized, well, actually, this could be a great PR boon, that it will put Vegas on the map, which is actually what it did, because people came from all around to watch the explosions.
The Devil's Wind is more than a novel of time and place, which is what we've been talking about. It's also a noir story about the obsessive power of revenge. I want to talk about that aspect when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
The Devil's Wind is the book. It's a novel, and I think it really flies above all kinds of classifications like noir and all that kind of stuff. It is just one heck of a good novel. The author, very personable, Richard Rayner, is with us, and a gentleman by the name Darren Strauss.
That's right. Yeah.
Author of Chang and Eng. Oh yeah, that was I remember that book. Those
the recipient of a $5 check from my mom. No.
And he also wrote The Real McCoy.
Right. Very good writer.
Raider's Electric Tale of 1950s Vegas and Hollywood is a knockout. Equal parts mob, potboiler, broken-hearted love story, and historical tour de force. You had time for all of that. Told with the precision and the exuberance of a Charlie Parker solo. Nice of him to get back to the jazz content. Look, it is in a sense all the things that Darren Strauss says it is, this book, Devil's Wind. But, in my opinion, it's also a dark story. It has a dark theme to it, a dark motif of obsessive revenge. Particularly as expressed in the character of Mallory Walker, a.k.a. Beth Dyer.
Right.
And the first time we meet her, she's, 11 years old,
right.
stealing something.
Sugar.
Stealing sugar. From that, right at that point, it seems, I thought, this is a very different character.
Right.
Talk a little bit about her and her story. And again, I don't want you to give the story away,
right.
But I do want you to talk about it because I think she's fascinating.
Yeah, no, I think what I managed to do with her, which I'd never quite done in a book before, was to take a walk around a character, so you see her from lots of different perspectives, and lots of other characters in the book have a view, and it's kind of her power comes from that, I think. And really, the idea of the character was. She starts off with, she's innocent, she's a girl, and she's a young girl, but her background is quite poor. Her father commits suicide. Her mother is a sort of very ambitious person who doesn't have that much time for her, who becomes a sort of Shelley Winters mom to her. Because everyone says to Beth, you're talented, you're great, you're going to be a wonderful actress.
Right.
So she grows up believing that she has this gift, that the world is going to appreciate. But instead of the gift being fulfilled, what happens is that she meets a black jazz player and falls in love with him. This leads to tragedy.
Well, actually, up to that time, by her lights, I think she's doing very well.
Right.
You know, she's in control of what she's doing. She's manipulating people. She's at least acting, which is what she really wants to do.
Right.
And it's very interesting that what tips the scale, what stops her from being what she thinks she really ought to be, is love.
Right. That's the sort of the sad irony. And what happens with those two characters, the Beth and the Wardell character, is that they run into the blunt, cruel force of American power. And they get broken by it. And it seems to me that one of the things that noir was always about is the confrontation with power, and the way that power is essentially always going to crush you. And the black boyfriend dies. Beth doesn't die. She's maimed and raped, but survives.
She's rumored to die several times.
And she comes back as this absolutely implacable force. And when I was writing the book, you know, she just wouldn't quit.
That's right.
I'd say to her, "You've got to give up now, Beth," and she would just come back, like stabbing some guy.
And that is really what I called it is an obsession for revenge.
Right.
And there's a line toward the end of the book which I didn't write down, but it's floating around in my mind, where one of the characters says that revenge is an impossible quest.
Right.
It will always end in distress, will always end in more need.
That yes, you can just never. It will never stop.
Never stop.
It's the Macbeth thing that you can once you're hell bent on that course of action. Actually, nothing is ever going to satisfy you. Even if you achieve the revenge that you think you want, you won't be satisfied by it.
It's an empty triumph.
Right.
It's an empty triumph.
This is the kind of the deeper, darker theme of the book, ultimately, maybe. And you know, she's a dark character. Although I love her as a character more than anyone I've written, I think.
Well, this is a book to love. This is a book to read and enjoy, because it's much more than any genre. It's fascinating. It's powerful. It's compelling. It's The Devil Wins. The author is Richard Rayner. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.